Well, now we've got the European Parliament spending taxpayers' money to promote the European elections, and they've come up with this amazing slogan, which you see up here: act, react, impact. It sounds to me like a car crash, and I think that is a perfect metaphor for the European project. Well, of course, it's the British flag, not the English flag, and I'm always delighted to see our British flag wherever it flies. Although I would see it here as being placed last in the line rather than closest to the heart of the Parliament. I always do take a careful look at it, because every so often I find that it's hanging upside down. And in fact, a couple of times I've had to make a point of order during a plenary session and ask the President of the Parliament to arrange for it to be hung the right way up, which is fairly astonishing, because I don't think you'd find the flag of any other nation hung the wrong way up. It is in fact very interesting that there is no direct legal basis for the European flag and indeed the European anthem. Of course, that was going to be in the failed European Constitution. And when they changed the text of the Constitution and created what they called the Lisbon Treaty, it was identical in almost every respect. Virtually the only changes they made were to drop out that legal base for the flag and the anthem, because they felt that would make Eurosceptics a little happier, two symbols of European nationhood that would disappear. But the interesting thing, of course, is that the two bits that they dropped from the text of the treaty are still there. The flag still flies, the anthem is still played. It was played only today, earlier today, to celebrate the visit of Aung San Suu Kyi to the European Parliament. And I think that's a beautiful illustration of the way that the institutions can appear to make a concession to public opinion, but in fact the concession is meaningless, because they go on doing exactly what they would have done if they hadn't made the concession. Well, I take the positive message that the people, when given the opportunity to vote on the European Constitution, chose to vote against it. There is great resistance out there to the idea of a European superstate. Nobody, I think, wants it apart from people in the European institutions. So I take encouragement from that. But the fact is, they never give up. They go on doing what they were going to do anyway. They see the people voting no to a constitution, or no to the Maastricht Treaty, or whatever it happens to be. They just carry on regardless. So, I mean, this is why we say in the UK that there is absolutely no point in seeking to renegotiate. The European Union has its own momentum, its own direction. Nothing is going to stop it. It is beyond reform. It deserves to be put out of its misery. Well, for me, there have always been two really big issues in politics that concern me and on which I focus my work. The first is the whole question of the European Union. The European Union is making us poorer and less democratic and less free. It's undermining democracy in my country, and I would say in other countries. And now, of course, you can see the economic damage that it's doing. Southern Europe absolutely laid waste by the disaster of the euro. These are the huge issues that brought me into politics. I never had any intention of becoming a politician. I had a perfectly good job in business. I did 30-odd years running businesses in Britain and in Asia and around the world. But I decided the problems in Brussels were so great that somebody ought to try and do something about them. So my starting point was my worry about Europe. Then, actually, rather before the current mandate, probably about last 2007, when I was, of course, in the Parliament, I started to be interested in and then concerned about the whole issue of energy and climate change. Because the decisions we are making about climate change are part of the economic damage which Europe is doing. Now, I say it's two issues, but in a sense it's one issue, because it is Europe that is setting the environmental policies. It's Europe that's setting the emissions targets. It's Europe that's imposing renewables on member states. And for example, it's because of European regulation that we in my country, in Britain, are closing down a number of perfectly good coal-fired power stations. Nothing wrong with them. They could run for another 10, 15 years. But we're closing them because of the European Union, and we're in real danger. So those are my two big issues. First of all, Europe, but then growing out of Europe, if you like, a real worry about an energy policy which is having a huge destructive effect on the European economy. Well, I'm not happy with where we've got on any of these issues. And you're right, we're in a minority here. There are other colleagues in the Parliament who believe that Europe is on the wrong track and that indeed the whole European concept should be merely about free trade, it shouldn't be about political union. And there are other colleagues here who agree that our energy policy is sheer madness. But we are in a minority, so we simply can't win the votes. But there are lots of things that we can do, and for me, probably the most important single thing is being a member of the Parliament gives me a platform back home to talk about these issues. I can get on television and the media and raise these issues and raise concerns about these issues. And there at least I think we are winning the argument, because we're now seeing opinion polls which show a majority of the British people would leave the European Union if they're given a choice. We are of course pressing for a referendum, so they should have a choice on whether they stay. Nobody aged under about 55 has ever had an opportunity in Britain to vote on on membership of the European Union. Similarly on energy, there is a huge debate developing in Britain now. We're looking at the risk of our lights going off. Our government energy regulator has warned that there are real risks of blackouts. The price of energy is going through the roof. Companies are moving out of Britain and investment is going elsewhere because energy is so expensive, we're not competitive. These messages are getting through. People are now aware of them. They're a main issue of public debate. So we may lose the votes in the Parliament, but we are getting the message across to the people, and eventually the people must have an opportunity to decide. Well, I mean, at one level we're treated with courtesy. We are members of the Parliament, so we get, in theory at least, the same rights and privileges. But what we don't get is any measure of agreement. I was discussing this with a Polish colleague over lunch. Essentially, there is a mindset in the European Parliament on certain issues. For example, we must have renewable energy. They've almost lost sight of the CO2. It must be renewable energy. They don't want nuclear, even though it's low CO2. So on those issues, we are not getting the progress in the Parliament. But what I'm really interested by is recently we've had, on the energy front, for example, we've had the Energy Commissioner, Oettinger, saying that Europe cannot continue to pursue a unilateral climate policy, and the next day we had the Industry Commissioner, Antonio Tajani, who came out and said we were creating an industrial massacre in Europe with high prices. So even amongst the European establishment, I think the word is starting to get through. They're starting to understand that they can't go on the way they're going. So far, we haven't seen that interpreted in policy terms. It's just a couple of sound bites. But it does seem the message is starting to get through. Well, today was a pretty typical day. I got in quite early, started going through the emails and sorting out the incoming mail from over the weekend. I got a call from our party leader, Nigel Farage. Would I go up and discuss the nuclear issue with him? We had a bit of a chat about that. We then had a meeting at 11 o'clock, which we call our voting meeting. In other words, before the votes, we go through what we're going to vote on and why we're going to vote this way or that way. Then the start of the voting. We then had a break in the voting when we had the Burmese leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, addressed us. Wonderful woman, and I think she made a very positive impression on the Parliament. We then resumed voting and voted on till well after 1 o'clock. Quick bite of lunch. Now I'm here talking to you. This afternoon I have the biofuels industry coming to see me at 3:30. They're very concerned about some biofuels regulation that's going through the Parliament. After that, I've got a chap from the music industry coming to talk about performers' royalties and performing rights and those sorts of issues. Again, we're legislating on those issues. 6 o'clock, we have our group meeting where we talk about, again, the business of the House and the business of the week. And that will take me through till probably 7:30, 7:45. Then at 8 o'clock, my party, UKIP, normally organises a dinner for MEPs and staff, usually on a Tuesday evening of the Strasbourg week, so I should go on to that. So the day starts at 7:30 in the morning, finishes at 10:30 at night. In the UK, of course, again, there's correspondence coming in. I have a constituency manager. I need to work with him and see what's been going on back home while I've been away. And then there are huge numbers of different groups who may want to talk to us, whether it's party branches, or it might be industry representatives, or it might be Rotary clubs or women's institutes or schools. or the media. Do quite a lot of work with the media. I seem to be doing more and more on the BBC these days. So yes, it does keep me busy. Certainly, I mean, we do get a certain amount of thinking time, which oddly enough is travelling. People often say, well, don't you get terribly bored with travelling? In a way, you don't get bored, it just becomes routine. But it does provide, for me, because I'm old-fashioned, I have a very simple phone, so at least I get away from emails when I'm travelling. And it's a chance to catch up with the news. I like to read the daily paper. And as you say, it's a chance to think about where we're going and to ask deep questions about the direction things are going in. Something we're worrying about at the moment, for example, take nuclear energy in the UK. I think we're all pleased in my party that there's been a decision to pursue a new nuclear power plant, but we are very worried as to whether the government's financing approach makes any sense for the taxpayer. So this whole question of how it should have been financed, I'm not prepared to go out and criticise what the government has done until I have an idea of, people are going to say, well, what would you do? And until I have that very clear in my mind, I don't want to get onto it. But obviously we need to think, we need to plan, I need to consult with colleagues, and so we have to come up with a proposal of how we would have done it better, and then we can talk about it. I mean, our position is that we could accept a Europe that was based on mutual intergovernmental, I stress intergovernmental cooperation and free trade. We are internationalists. We're often criticised, oh well, you don't want to be in the EU, so you're xenophobic isolationists. No, we're not. We are the globalists. We are the internationalists. We want to be engaged with the world, not just with a Europe which is in long-term economic decline. So yes, we'd like to have free trade. We'd like to have free trade around the world. So we're very happy to pursue a free trade agenda. We're very happy to cooperate within Europe with European trading partners and neighbours, but it must be free intergovernmental negotiation. So if somebody comes up with a plan to do something or other, we have to be in a position where we can say, yes, that's a great idea, we'll sign up to that, or no, we don't like it. We cannot have a situation where unelected organisations and institutions in Brussels can tell our elected government what to do, because that is a negation of democracy. We have to be, as an independent nation, able to make our own decisions. Our own voters have to feel they can change the government and that the new government will do what they asked it to do or what it promised to do. At the moment, we don't have that. Democracy is under attack in Europe.